So the Twitter files are out, and there's a lot of juicy details in them. I'm sure there's still a lot that we're going to find out. I've read Matt Taibbi's thread, so I have a general grasp of the situation. And there are some things that I was expecting that don't shock me at all. And there's a couple of other areas where I am a tad surprised. The big surprise to me was that Twitter really, in this case, in the case of the Hunter Biden laptop story, for those of you who don't know what the Twitter files refer to, this is what Elon Musk describes as Twitter's interference in the 2020 election. And these are a series of internal emails that have now been made public by Chief Twit Elon Musk. He has given them first exclusively to Matt Taibbi, who I think is a good person to hand these off to, rather than giving them to some hacks at the New York Times. Matt Taibbi's read through them, and he put out a good thread on Twitter. And it would seem as though Twitter was not acting at the behest of the regime, of the deep state, or of any government actor. Twitter was acting entirely in a private capacity, which I find interesting. Now, unsurprisingly, titular CEO Jack Dorsey, had pretty much nothing to do with this decision. He didn't even know at the time in which the Hunter Biden laptop was banned. Nobody asked him. That was not his decision. That was, unsurprisingly, Vijaya Gadde's exclusive decision. I have known since the day that Jack and Vijaya were on Joe Rogan with Tim Pool that Jack Dorsey was not the actual CEO of Twitter. It became very clear that he was the figurehead guy who would go on fun shows like Joe Rogan. But then when they were challenged to have a serious discussion, he had to have Vijaya come along with him because she was the real brains. She wore the pants over at Twitter. And I believe she actually was wearing pants on the show. I'm not sure if Vijaya's ever worn a skirt in her life, to be quite honest. So the woman was on a mission. She was on a mission to get Trump at all costs and to clear the way for one Joseph Robinette Biden to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, or I guess I should say 1600 Black Lives Matter Plaza. Now, something that was confirmed through the Twitter files is that the Democratic Party does have a backdoor into Twitter where they essentially email Twitter staff with tweets that they want removed. But the interesting thing was that apparently during the 2020 election, so did the Trump campaign, not just the Biden campaign. But I think that we can be pretty safe in saying that the Biden campaign had much more sway when it came to deciding what should and should not be removed from Twitter. So something else that surprised me was the fact that there was internal pushback against banning the Hunter Biden laptop and all the data that was on it under the hacked materials policy that they have over at Twitter. Apparently, you're not supposed to share hacked data. I guess everybody internally at Twitter knew that the Hunter Biden laptop wasn't hacked and that it really was just found. They didn't seriously question the story of the guy from the computer repair store who ended up with Hunter's laptop. And some of them were actually against the idea because they were honest and said, hey, this does not fit, this doesn't break the rules in any sense. How are we censoring this? Which to me, it kind of goes against my bias to believe that there were people inside Twitter who would dissent against this sort of thing. I would just think it would be automatic, like, oh, obviously, this hurts Joe Biden, and this was right, in October. This was an October surprise. Of course, everyone in Twitter is going to agree with censoring it because, it's speech that hurts them. But apparently, there were some old bitter clingers who were still hanging on in Twitter back then, including, of course, Jack Dorsey. Not that he had any real power. But I've always thought that Jack was a genuine, though very naive and feckless individual. Now, we are 2 years on from this period. Does it really matter? The people involved here are no longer in charge. They have been run out on a rail. And so is this going to have much of an impact on contemporary politics, on the future? I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to have for the historical record. But again, the people who write the history books are wokesters anyway. So this isn't going to make it into the history books. We'll have to be removed far from this period before I think the so-called Twitter files will have much of an impact. 50 years from now, perhaps looking back, people look at that and go like, wow, Twitter interfered to throw the 2020 election for Biden. But in the meantime, are people really going to care? No. People who supported Trump, generally speaking, already think it was an unfair election, and people who supported Biden are never going to be convinced that it wasn't the most secure election in American history and that there was nothing untoward. Now, to be clear, Twitter interfering to suppress information that is negative for the Biden campaign is different than the idea that the election was not secure or that there was potential fraud. Those are very different concepts. What we're talking about here is the idea that Twitter played an active role in the campaign, that they were not just some neutral space in which everyone could, exchange ideas and hash out their differences. Rather, Twitter as a platform was weaponized to serve the Democratic cause. Now, is that a surprise to anybody? Is that a shock? That's exactly what big tech said they would do after 2016. So yeah, there's some interesting details to pick out of this, but the big picture hasn't changed. This isn't going to change people's minds. The people liking and retweeting Matt Taibbi's thread are people who already suspected that this was going on, to begin with. We're in a post-persuasion era in America. Facts are not what wake people up and get them to change their mind on things. If people, switch sides on some kind of issue, so to speak, it's because something deep inside them has changed. It has nothing to do with the outside world. It has nothing to do with the facts on the ground. So, as far as I'm concerned, the Twitter files will have no real impact on any of our lives. But they are useful as a signaling device because in releasing these, Elon is signaling that his disapproval with this practice, and he is also signaling that he will not do it in the future. So honestly, I don't think there's really much else to say on this topic. With that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.